cargo ramp rose behind him with a deep mechanical groan.
Proximity warning.
Locks engaged along the frame, shutting out the station lights until only the red lamps of the bay remained. The commander crossed beneath the feet of the company's lone BattleMech. It stood secured inside the first bay, armor-scarred and mismatched, one shoulder panel visibly newer than the rest. Chief Brandt and Lena remained beneath it, making their final checks as the ship's systems came alive. Lena looked up from the diagnostic terminal. "Commander, I think the left knee actuator is drifting." Brandt leaned toward the screen. "It is not drifting. The sensor is. How do you know?" "Because if the actuator were drifting, we would currently be underneath several tons of falling machine." Lena looked up at the BattleMech, then took one careful step sideways. Brandt sighed. "Leave it. I will recalibrate it after launch." The commander glanced toward the machine. "Will it walk?" Brandt folded his arms.
"System damage."
"Yes. Will it fight?" There was a longer pause.
Warning. Reactor temperature rising. Warning. Warning. Warning.
"Yes. That was not convincing. You did not pay for convincing." The commander marked the machine as secured and continued toward the forward compartments. The ship vibrated as docking clamps disengaged one after another. In the galley, Iris Vale had strapped down the last storage container and was attempting to stop Tomas Rel from opening the emergency rations. "They are emergency rations," she said. "This feels like an emergency. We have not even departed." "Exactly. We are still close enough to replace them. Put it back." Tomas returned the packet to the cabinet when the commander entered. "I was inspecting it." "Were you trained to inspect food?" the commander asked. "No." "Then stop volunteering." Thomas closed the cabinet. "Yes, Commander." The ship shuddered more sharply. A low pressure settled through the deck as maneuvering thrusters pushed the vessel away from Kestrel anchorage. The commander reached the bridge as Ayala emerged across the forward windows, vast and pale beneath them. Mara Voss stood over the navigation table, calling out distances while Ven guided the ship away from the station's traffic lanes. Ram Tiller sat at communications, listening to docking control complain about their departure speed. "Anchorage control says we are 4 degrees outside the marked corridor," Ram reported. Van adjusted the controls without looking at him. "Tell them their corridor moved." It did not. "Then tell them we did." Mara looked toward the commander. "All personnel confirmed aboard. Cargo secured. Fuel reserves are lower than projected, but sufficient to reach the jump point and rendezvous with our transport." "How much lower?" "Enough to make Captain Van's departure maneuver unnecessarily expensive." Van continued watching the flight display. Docking fees were about to become more expensive. The commander placed the clipboard beside the navigation console. Every box had been checked. Every name had been accounted for. The ship was moving under its own power, and the station was already shrinking behind them. For the first time, there was nothing left to purchase, sign, inspect, or delay. They had left. Keel entered the bridge carrying a metal cup and leaned against the rear bulkhead. "So what are we called?" The commander looked at her. The ship is called the Wayfarer. I know the ship's name. We do not require another. Bram turned slightly in his chair. The contract office does. Mara nodded. Mercenary registration requires a company designation before we can formally accept combat work. The commander looked down at the clipboard. Use my name. Ven glanced back at him. No. The answer was immediate enough to draw everyone's attention. The commander's expression did not change. No? You hired us to run a ship, Ven said. Not spend the rest of our lives introducing ourselves as somebody's personal property. Keel raised her cup. I agree with the captain. That may be the first recorded instance, Mara said. Thomas leaned through the open bridge hatch. What are we voting on? Company name, Bram said. We are a company already? No, the commander replied. Keel looked around the bridge. We have a ship, a BattleMech, a payroll, and enough debt to qualify as an organization. That sounds like a company. Dr. Wren appeared behind Tomas, drawn by the conversation. Does the name affect medical funding? No, Mara said. Then I abstain. More of the crew began gathering outside the bridge, some still wearing work gloves or grease-stained coveralls. Brant stood at the rear with Lena beside him, both having abandoned the BattleMech bay long enough to listen. The commander watched them collect as if the question mattered. Perhaps it did. A military unit inherited its name from a government, regiment, or noble house. A mercenary company had to decide what it was before anyone else decided for it. Tomas spoke first. The Wayfarers. Ven shook his head. Too obvious. Wayfarer Company? Worse. Keel looked toward the commander. What was the first thing you told us when you hired us? That payment was conditional upon departure. No, before that. The commander remembered the conversation separately. Then, in a station office, Brant beside the machine, Wren in a nearly empty clinic. He had offered none of them glory, security, or loyalty. I told you the work would be dangerous. You told me, Keel said, that the objective was survival. Lena looked around the group. Survival is not much of a company name. No, Brant said, but it is an honest reason to form one. Bram turned back toward his console and began entering possible registrations. Survivor Company is already taken. Of course it is, Mara said. What about Last Light? Lena asked. The bridge became quieter. Beyond the windows, Kestrel Anchorage had become a cluster of distant lights against the dark. Aishala filled the lower view, but ahead of them there was only open space and the faint marker of their jump rut. Tomas nodded slowly. Last Light mercenaries. Keel considered it. Sounds like we show up when everything else has failed. Brant grunted. That is probably when people will be able to afford us. Ven rested one hand on the controls. I have heard worse. Mara looked toward the commander. He studied the faces around him. They had chosen the name without asking what image he wanted to project or what enemies he wanted to frighten. It described none of those things. It described what they were, a single light moving away from safety, uncertain how long it would remain visible. It will need to fit on the registration, he said. Bram smiled and began typing. Then that is a yes. The commander picked up the clipboard again. Register it. Bram entered the designation into the ship's records. Last Light Mercenaries. The name appeared across the communications display, plain white letters awaiting transmission. No one cheered. There was no speech, no oath, and no ceremonial beginning. Ven guided the wayfarer toward the jump point. Keel returned to the cargo deck. Brant and Lena went back to the BattleMech. The others scattered to their stations as naturally as if the decision had always been made. The commander remained on the bridge, looking forward into the dark. The company now had a name. It still needed a contract.